You're listening to the second episode of Trysteropod. I'm David Colma. The other guy is Dorian Wallace. We're composers. We're composers who are going to talk about music and apparently politics and other things as Dorian sees fit. So, how's it going, Dorian?
It's going well, man. How about you?
I'm doing just fine. I'm more relaxed than I've been. I'm not as sick or anywhere close to being sick as the last time we did this. So, everything's going nice.
I believe we were both sick last week.
Yes, but not necessarily during when we were recording, but anyway,
right.
So it's going just fine.
Yeah. So I actually just wanted to talk a little bit. I went to go see the New York Phil do, and I'm gonna fuck this name up so hard, but Übertung by Arnold Schoenberg. Yeah, I know I screwed it up.
It's okay.
And Bluebeard's Castle by Bela Bartok. I just saw their performance of it last Thursday, and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible.
Who was
now?
Who was Bluebeard? Did you know this?
Pull up that info.
Well, I can pull it up. You keep talking. Let me look it up.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing that was so incredible, they really took a psychoanalytic approach, and specifically like the psychoanalysis that was being developed by Sigmund Freud and Carl von Jung, and it just it was a lot of sort of like old school psychoanalytics, which a lot of it is seen as pretty out of date nowadays, especially Freud and Jung. A lot of their hypotheses that they developed are still incredibly important. The concept of the unconscious mind, even like the concept of archetypes and the concept of mythology, and the concept of dreams being the royal road into the unconscious. But anyways, the thing that was so cool about this show was they really took a sort of an experience as if we were going deep into the unconscious of the two different characters. The three different characters in the two operas. So Übertung was, first off, I love the piece. For instance, I didn't know that there's no repeated material at all. It's all completely...
Oh, in the Schoenberg?
Yeah, the Schoenberg. I didn't, I've heard the piece, many, many times, and, it is very Schoenberg, and the way I always think of Schoenberg's music is he's always, to me, just sort of this, little child who's just, really, really into expressing himself. I really do hear Schoenberg's music as just the most, and he's not necessarily, the most polished composer. He seems to kind of write the drafts and keep them that way. I don't know if anybody else hears it that way.
Well, you're thinking of the atonal music. Mm-hmm. Well, it's sort of it's got a certain sandbox quality to it. Yeah, that's true.
Right. But anyways, the part of the program that and I just realized I am jumping ahead a little bit, but
anywhere you like, man.
So yeah, the whole show was pretty incredible. The orchestra sounded great, the singers were incredible, but Bluebeard's Castle, holy fuck! So I've seen the production. I saw the Met when they did it, not last year, but 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And my wife has also she saw a performance of it done in Hungary, in Budapest, where they did the performances back to back. They played it twice in a row.
Oh, Jesus.
One from the perspective of the woman, and one from the perspective, from Judith, and one from the perspective of Bluebeard. This one was a performance I've never seen before, because Bluebeard is always so obviously like an ominous villain. You know, that's how I've always seen it. It's like, oh, he's scary. Like he's up to something.
Sure.
This one, they treated it as he was the victim, as in he was a victim of trauma, and the wives were archetypes that were existing in his unconscious, and she loved him so much and was in like such an important like they had such a strong relationship. She wanted to get closer to him, to, you know, like to dig through each like level of the unconscious to find out what's buried deep within him. And it was incredible. I mean, we were really in tears by the end of it, just because I've never related to Bluebeard before, and they were really taking, you know, the way that Jung especially looked at, you know, the archetypes we develop and put inside of our minds, as basically like precautionary like safety mechanisms.
Sure.
And we, you know, they end up manifesting in these various characters that appear in our dreams, and so it was really showing, you know, that it was, you know, Bluebeard had some serious trauma that he had buried deep in his unconscious, and she was along for the journey.
Sure.
You know.
Wow.
Well, yeah, and I do have to say, it's interesting because I actually, this is actually going to get a little heavy, so I apologize, David, but this is how we talk. So I actually, the last couple of years have been kind of on a journey of developing, you know, getting into my mindfulness practice. I do these long-ass meditation retreats, and I also have finished all the coursework in a music therapy course, and I now see a therapist. I've been seeing one for a couple of months, and I'm on anti-anxiety medication. And have actually, just in the last 2 weeks, it's been uncovered in my therapy that I'm actually a victim of abuse, like domestic abuse.
Really?
And, oh yeah, and it's a really interesting thing, because the person who was abusive to me, I don't blame them. Short version, I was in a relationship at a very young part of my life, you know, first serious girlfriend.
Oh, okay, this story. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, well, about 2 years, and she got diagnosed with some pretty heavy mental illness, you know, specifically, I don't know if it was really schizophrenia or schizoaffective, but it was some delusion-oriented, like paranoid delusion, mental health issue. And, you know, and she actually did, like, I'm actually really close with her now. Like, I have no animosity towards her, because I don't blame her for any of the stuff that happened when we were together. But that being said, I've started to come to terms with that. It really affected me in a horrible way. You know, I think I've actually had a lot of commitment issues ever since that relationship, because I have this fear of being hurt so badly. And, you know, and keep in mind, like, this abuse, like, I was actually physically hit multiple times. I was attacked by weaponry. I was degraded, you know, like, you're an ugly piece of shit, you're horrible, you deserve to die, like, all this kind of stuff regularly during a developmental period of my life. And so anyways, you know, just kind of uncovering each little step, you know, I really do blame sort of the toxic masculine culture. Not 100%, there's many factors, but we do have this culture where men don't get abused, you know, like, or at least don't admit it or don't feel it, or it's not taken seriously.
Yeah. Yes.
And it just, it was actually, you know, just through some of the work the last couple of years. Well, and also, I should tell you that I've been having panic attacks pretty much most of my life that I never acknowledged as panic attacks. And the time it actually hit me that I needed to really seek medical attention was I was with some friends at the beach, and I just had this like freak out moment, and I wouldn't go swim with any of them. And they were all like, "What's going on, man?" And I made up all these weird excuses just not to go in the fucking water. But I could, at this point I'd been meditating for a couple of years and was really in tune with my heart rate and just how fast it was going for seemingly no reason. And so it was like, all right, this has happened so many times in my life, and I'm now aware, like, my heart rate just goes up, like, rapidly. And when that happens, I just shut the fuck down. And so that's when I actually decided to go and find a psychiatrist, and actually get prescribed medication. And then also with the therapy, just a lot of things have been getting uncovered. And so anyways, Philosophy Tube had just put out a video like a month and a half ago talking about domestic violence from a masculine perspective. What it's like to be, a leftist, feminist man, cis man, and experience physical abuse and relationship trauma. And he described it in a way I've never heard before. Because the thing is, whenever you get into, men's rights activism, it's always this awful pseudoscience, fascist, far-right, reactionary shit.
Yes.
And Philosophy Tube was the first one where he was looking at it through, what I would say is a realistic lens, but looking at it through the lens of being a feminist and looking through the lens of being aware that mental health is a serious issue. And so anyways, all of that, man, my wife and I saw Bluebeard's Castle presented from a male having serious trauma and digging deeper into his mind with someone who loves him so much. Not to get too heavy, but I mean, any heavier than I just got. But it was basically what we're going through right now. As a couple, and I'm starting to become comfortable talking about it too, which is a good thing, I think.
Well, you've now recorded 10 minutes on it, so.
Yep. So yeah. Well, and just to reemphasize, like, I really do find it, I don't blame the person who all of this happened to. And in fact, when she got diagnosed and her life balanced out much more, she actually did apologize, like, very sincerely, because it was stuff that was out of her control. Like, you can't control if you're having paranoid delusions, but
no, you can't.
The thing that has become more and more clear is I did reach out to people when it was happening, and no one believed me.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm not
and
surprised.
I actually, and I mean, and I think a lot of that is the way we look at men and women. And right now, I'm talking like very like in a gendered manner, just to talk about my own personal experience in all of this.
Right. Because you had a gendered experience.
Yes. And it, like, one of the things was when I was like trying to tell people that she was hitting me, it wasn't taken seriously at all because I'm bigger. She was very tiny at the time. I mean, we were in high school at the time, so it's. I was never like in physical harm necessarily, but the psychological damage of having your partner, actually punching you regularly out of anger,
right, and at the same time that they're like psychologically tormenting you with insults and denigrations. Yeah. Couldn't have been easier.
Yeah. But all that being said, it was just a fantastic performance, and I do have some qualms with New York Phil. I think Sometimes their performances can be quite apathetic. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
this was not one of them. It was
good.
one of the better shows I've seen.
Sure.
And of course, there is the factor of the relatability, like the fact that this story was so relatable to the relationship I'm in, and just what we're going through, probably helped. And it is Bartok, who happens to be a fucking badass. So
Yeah, we don't tend to tell stories of men in the abused part of a relationship
hmm
in our society. It's like the idea that, so there's a big problem in the military with sexual assault.
Oh yes.
And mainly it's discussed as women in the military being abused by their superiors. And the story that no one wants to tell is the fact that men are being abused in the same way by their superiors. Not all men, of course, but there are men who are being physically abused, sexually abused, in the way that women in the military are. But because we're more comfortable with the idea that men, it has to do with sexuality and straightness versus gayness. It's all this kind of stuff gets tossed up in the air, and so it ends up being that certain stories aren't told because we're used to telling the story of the men being the oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we live in a society where plenty of men are being oppressed for reasons there are all these sorts of things.
And how many times do you hear the quote of, this happens all the time in the military, of the, oh, men can't be raped because they love sex.
Right, men can't be. Yeah, it's like that's horseshit. Yeah, there are women that rape men too. That happens. So it's like, the idea that so obviously the things we're talking about are all about power, and the idea, and what's really true is in the end, under any there can be almost any context when any human can have unequal power over any other human being and abuse that power, and to varying degrees. So the idea that there are more prevalent versions, or more like sort of statistically significant ones in terms of, this happens more to this kind of person than this kind of person. But that doesn't mean that there aren't examples of it happening the other direction, and that being a big problem or something that needs, that requires people to seek medical help. Or having some sort of larger cultural discussion or attempted solutions for that.
Well, I also think I actually find the reactionary position to be very toxic in this whole debate as well. Have you seen the film The Red Pill?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's weird. It's what's her name? Cassie J. It's a documentary from 2016, and it follows the men's right movement, and it's just I don't know, man. I watched this film just to, because I like to look at things that I don't understand and don't agree with, and everything is blamed on feminism as an idea, which is horseshit.
Yeah.
Personally, there was no data presented. It was a lot of sort of weird anecdotal stories, but the anecdotal stories weren't even from the person, like from the victim themselves. It was like I had a friend who this happened to.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
And it's just like it's like, all right, like I think everyone deserves to be heard, and everybody should be taken seriously, but it was just it felt like the documentary came out with the point of proving that feminism is horrible and really the cause of all of this, which it I don't know, like it seemed like at the very beginning of the film that was already the conclusion that it was aiming to set out to do.
Well, of course it was. Why else do you create a propaganda film?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, Dorian, it makes me think about when I ran for Congress. I was going around a few counties, and it wasn't a bunch of counties in South Carolina, trying to spread a leftist message. And I regularly would encounter people when talking about, and they would bring up the welfare state, unemployment benefits. And generally, keep in mind, I'm often talking to conservative people. So, and they would regularly bring up that they knew people who benefited from stuff like unemployment or food stamps or stuff like that. And there are good people who deserve those programs. And then they would immediately do but those people over there are abusing this system and they shouldn't be allowed to. So therefore, that's something we should limit. And it's like, and of course, keep in mind, those people over there often, the implication of their statements was often like, I don't know, the black people in their community. So it was this sort of like racist tirade in the form of government, of making sure the government was helping the right people and not the wrong people. And it was just, it's that same kind of, the basic assumption that there are people who are taking advantage of the system. I don't doubt that there are. But the idea that you should curtail the system because certain people are abusing it, it is just, it's so reactionary and insane. It's like the idea that feminism is because there are men who are not thriving under the current system whereby women have more power than they've ever had before, which is way less than the power men have in general still, is somehow the reason that certain men are failing in their lives. And so we're going to blame this whole movement on whose purposeful aim is gender equality and gender equity, as somehow being the reason that certain men are not socially capable of having meaningful relationships with people that they want to have romantic relationships with. I mean, it's just ludicrous.
Oh yeah. It's sort of like it's the same kind of argument somebody like Dave Rubin uses, where I used to be left wing, and I still am, but leftism has gone so far away. It's like Dave, like what, like leftism is the I'm totally rambling right now, but
let me
see the
put
point
a
I'm
fine
trying
point
to make?
on it.
Yeah.
Let me put a fine point on it. Is the main distinction between people on the right and the left in a country such as ours is that the people on the left want there to be social services that are available to everyone. The people on the right want those same social services just for them. So the idea that you're still left-wing because you support a certain amount of the welfare state, but you only want certain people to get it, that's called being a Nazi.
Right.
Because you know who liked the welfare state? Hitler.
Yeah,
he just only wanted it for white. He only wanted it for white people. He didn't want it for gay people. He didn't want it for Jews. He didn't want it for people of Slavic descent. I mean, come on, like this whole fucking thing that you're somehow still to the left on the spectrum because, I still believe in free speech. I mean, come on.
Well, and the thing I am going to say is I don't even think a lot of the people actually believe in free speech. I think they only believe in their free speech, because there was just a video I was just watching of Ben Shapiro, like literally yesterday or the day before, where he was talking about the song Imagine by John Lennon.
Yes.
How horrible and dumb this song is. Yeah, and in the middle of it, he says we should take every copy and burn them.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
And I was just sitting there thinking, like, wait, you wanna burn something because you disagree with it, or you think it's stupid?
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm.
That's, you know,
that's totalitarianism right there.
Yeah, it's
Authoritarian
it's
bullshit.
Fascism.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well,
it's not National Socialism, but it is fascism.
So the thing we have to remember, Dorian, is that a large number of people in any given population would so prefer stability over freedom that they will gladly take a fascist who will maintain their stability. That is, their stability is maintained by having slaves in other places, holding up a shit ton of people in prisons, destroying people's lives at the border, and I could go on, murdering people who we say don't belong here anymore. I mean, all of that is in the name of stability, and they'll gladly support someone like that because it protects their life. In full recognition that other people's lives are being harmed. It's the same kind of thought that's like, oh, well, I got in as an immigrant into this country. Woohoo. And then saying, well, anyone in the similar circumstances as me now, fuck them, they don't get in.
Right.
I mean, just ask Ted Cruz about immigration. Mm-hmm. That's all you got to do.
Yeah. No, there's actually a human being coming to mind that is an immigrant who is very pro-Trump, and it's strange hearing the way he speaks about Trump and doesn't seem to grasp that 5 years ago he would have fit into this category. It's very weird.
Oh, by the way, for anyone listening to this, if you haven't yet figured out, Dorian and I are both so far down in the bottom left corner of that four-corner compass spectrum of politics that we both think Bernie Sanders is the acceptable moderate that we're willing to vote for way more than everyone else.
Yeah, I was on a text message conversation with some military buddies of mine, and somebody actually said, I don't know if we should put Biden up there. He's too far left. And I went on a tirade, being like, he's a center right-winger.
Right. He's
literally right of center. All of his policies, everything he voted for, everything he stood for, exist in the right. It's...
He just happened to stand near a black man who was slightly to the left of him, but still right of center. Right. That's all it was. That's all he did for 8 years. He stood next to a guy.
Yeah.
And
listeners, we consider Barack Obama right wing. Just to clarify this.
Yes, that's the Bernie Sanders is in the square middle of that compass spectrum.
Right.
Bam. So it's like, so we have complaints about Barack Obama. That isn't news to anyone.
Right.
My wife was telling me about an interview she was listening to with Chris Hedges on Democracy Now! I think it was today's episode. And she was just sending me texts about him just straight up calling Mike Pence a fascist. I was like, yeah, well, he's right. Calling him a heretic. I was like,
yeah.
So it's this. So just in case if you've listened this far and you think we're insane, any other podcasts of this you listen to ever again will be the more of this.
Yep. Yeah, and also just to point out, we're really not insane. We know a lot. We read a lot.
Yes, exactly. It's not about
experience a lot. Experience a lot too.
Well, if you view us as insane for thinking and saying the things we do, you might want to listen to something else.
Yeah, totally.
No, we pay attention. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about something else?
I actually kind of just want to keep going
Oh,
on
go
about
ahead.
weird reactionaries.
Sure, okay, it's fine with me.
Yes, so, I've been thinking about this stuff very thoroughly because, so I used to be right-wing.
Sure.
And when I say right-wing, I mean...
Your parents voted Republican.
Yep. My parents were Republican, are Republican, and, I always thought of myself as a Republican, and I joined the military and, really started to fall more libertarian, like Ron Paul-esque libertarian.
Wait, you still thought of yourself as a Republican when you were a weed-smoking undergrad?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, wow, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But that was the thing, man. I only thought of it in my mind. I wasn't really involved with anything.
Oh, sure, of course.
But it was actually the military when it was like, I don't agree with anything the Republicans can stand for, policy wise. And Ron Paul was actually the first politician I had ever heard, talking about anti-war in a really serious way, and I was like, all right, whoa, I guess I'm actually libertarian. Now, the thing that makes it a little deeper was that made me realize I was actually not a right-wing libertarian was the economic policies, as well as, Ron Paul's kind of insane bigotry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's like I can't ever forget that he was sort of a major turning point for me realizing I wasn't a Republican either.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's a part where it's like, yeah, I mean, we all have our own path. But anyways, the thing that was so interesting was, kind of realizing it was like, oh my God, I've always been, a left-wing libertarian or a, anarcho-syndicalist or what, whatever title you want to call it. It's just that I didn't have the terminology that defined sort of what I already believed.
Sure.
I don't know. What about you, David? I don't know your background actually at all on this. I know where you are now.
So, I mean, I was focused on music for the longest time. I mean, even as a kid. So I grew up in a house of basically Democrats. My mother tends to go with the political winds politically, or at least she did at the time. Because I always called my dad like the most liberal person I knew. I mean, he was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. I don't think his draft number ever got called, but anyway, he filled out the paperwork for that, as I understand it. Hopefully I'm not wrong about that. He was like the youngest. He was in the youngest thing around that time, so he didn't get drafted. But he was Lutheran minister, but on the left wing, So I grew up in Lakewood, which has a large gay population. It's been that way for as long as I've been alive. I mean, so we were in one of the few. It's expanded some. The few Reconciling in Christ congregations in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the ELCA. That's just the mainline Lutheran in the United States. And that means that that was a church that would accept having gay and lesbian and all the the acronym of all of that sort of stuff. We were open to having those people in church. So I grew up around openly gay people all the time. I mean, it's just a normal thing. My pastor, who was not my father because he's a hospital chaplain. He would. Our pastor would perform union ceremonies for people who wanted to sort of sacralize their partnerships that weren't when they weren't allowed to get married. I mean, so it's like I grew up in a place like this. I mean, so my trip of deciding I wasn't a Christian was against pretty left Christianity. Sure. But in the end, I mean, I think my parents voted for. I think they voted for Perot in the 90s. It's just, well, it's like my dad recognizes bullshit when he sees it. My mother went with the winds in the 2000s, and she voted for Bush, and then went and voted for Obama. My dad stayed in the same place politically. He was always basically a Democrat. But from there, I mean, I really didn't have any political change until after college. This was when we knew each other, really. Mm-hmm. But it was just recognizing that I was never going to get a job, and being like, "What the fuck is this all about?" So, and then it was doing the reading and meeting the people who were like being fucked by this system, and understanding that, well, holy fucking shit, the Democrats aren't going to do a goddamn thing to save us.
Yeah.
Because here's the idea is like, if you don't really pay attention to politics in our society, and you basically are living a decent life, you basically agree with whatever happens on the news, in the newspapers or on television or on the radio. I mean, the political points of view they give you are the ones that are fine. And so the thing that you value, because that's what these people value, is this middle of the road idea, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I always thought myself farther to the left, but, I was willing to sit in the middle if I thought it would be advantageous. But it ended up not working because, well, fuck, I'm getting fucked. So, no, but just so then that's how I went and found people to the left and Chomsky, and haven't really looked back since then. I mean, I remember the first time I saw Democracy Now!, which it's my main news source, even though I haven't paid attention to the news in a couple of months. It's really more like a month. I was in Boston, living in Boston, and going to a grad program for a semester. I was there for about 10 months. And there was on the local television, and I only had local channels, and I watched television to avoid having to practice. And Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman would show up, and I'd watch it and go, what the hell is this lefty news shit? It was like, what is this pinko news, Which, now that I know what Democracy Now! Is, I'm sorry to all the pinko communists out there that I at some point thought that Amy Goodman had anything to do with communism, because that is clearly not the case.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, she's basically holds the social democracy line is where that show is, which is fine. Right. They're good they cover war. Nobody else does. So that's the reason to pay attention. But yeah, so no, I mean, like, I basically came from the left, from Democrats rather than Republicans. In the end. So no, I mean, I vehemently disagree with my mother when Bush was president. I was really angry about that.
Wow.
I mean,
I
saw Fahrenheit 9/11 when it came out. My dad and I went to go see it. I was steaming mad for days.
Yeah.
And I watched Fahrenheit 11/9 and was like, wow, that's propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so it's I don't. Yeah, no, I just went farther left in the end, Dorian. I mean, when we were interacting with Jason more often.
Yes.
I mean, who's a dyed-in-the-wool libertarian in certain ways, like right-wing libertarian. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was more willing to listen to his point of view than I would be now. Not that I would be mean about it or anything. I was willing to sort of... But he was always being an asshole about saying that the Democrats were always just... Like, well, he would always assume that my position was whatever the Democratic politicians were advocating, which I always had to say is like, I don't think those things, Jason.
Right.
So, but that was his particular set of political blinders. I know I have my own.
Yeah.
So it was like I just really wasn't paying that much attention, and when I was finally paying attention, I realized that I didn't want to have anything to do with either of the major parties, and that that I'm farther left than the Green Party is, and I formed a version of myself that was more willing to participate in sort of electoral politics to run for Congress. Because, well, obviously you can't run for Congress as an anarchist. That would be hysterically funny.
There's a certain, how about this? We need to do an opera about an anarchist who runs for Congress and wins.
God.
Like for the anarchist party.
Right, yeah.
Like something ridiculous like that.
So it's like, that's like a perfect example of that, of that Groucho Marx joke, I'd never join a club that would have me as a member. I mean, right. Literally no anarchist would join an anarchist party.
Right.
Of course, they have collectives, of course, right? And syndicates.
I would consider IWW to be pretty anarcho-socialist.
Right. Well, you know what? So the thing is that, of course, they'd be willing to have a party if they wrote up the, this is the thing is they're against there being bylaws. It's like. Mm-hmm. So it's like the nature of that kind of organization would require them to lay too much down in stone and to make it too hard to leave for them to be willing to put an organization together, right? They're more than happy to have free association agreements that would allow people to interact and create things collectively. That's the whole fucking idea. But
the thing I've found just with IWW and even the DSA. Because I do the stuff with the DSA chorus now, and the argument that's always used is against socialism, in whatever form it may take, is that people are too wild or it's too ridiculous, and I don't know, man. I've had really way more positive experience in the flattened organizations I've been a part of than any of the hierarchical organizations, whether it be academia or the military or a job, like a call center, or even just like awful like session gigs, or where there's some band leader who just thinks you're their property suddenly.
So can I tell a story related to this, please? So local politics, Cleveland Heights, Ohio. There are a group of people that want to change the nature of the way Cleveland Heights is organized politically. Right now we have a city council. The person who is elected by the fellow members of the city council to be the president of the city council is called the mayor. So there really isn't a mayor per se. Right, we have 7 members of a city council that all have equal votes, and they appoint a city manager who literally runs everything. So we basically just have a 7-member legislature who appoints the executive, who then doesn't answer to us except for the members of city council. There are a group of people in town who want us to remake the charter to be more like most of the other municipalities around here, who have a strong mayor, right? So you have a mayor who you elect separately, and they have veto power over the things that the city council wants to do. They would be the person who would oversee a person that would replace the city manager and have a different title. Both of them would be full-time and get paid more money. Well, they'd be paid the equivalent amount of money that the current people who do that kind of stuff are doing right now. And so what they want and what they're advocating for is that there be a single person who's in charge of everything, and then the legislator being a check on that single person's power. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. What changes do you want to make to the city, or what corrupt nature of things is going on that you're upset that our city manager, who we don't elect, who's just an administrator, has 7 bosses instead of 1? I mean, that's really the main problem. It's that we have a diffuse power structure.
Yeah.
That means that the person who's called the mayor of Cleveland Heights has no more power than one of the other members of the Cleveland City Council.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they're angry that we're not being represented in our city. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We're represented by 7 people.
Right.
And I don't understand this is the anarchist in me coming out, is I don't understand what your problem is. If we're going to have an elected government, why do you want there to be one person who's going to make a whole shit ton of decisions that we're all going to have to live with? Okay, so if we don't like it, we'll vote him out. But isn't that what the city council is for?
Right.
And it's just like they want checks and balances, but they also want the government to be more responsive. And I'm like, don't you understand that checks and balances are created in order to gum up the works?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of having an executive branch separate from the legislature is in order so that less things happen.
Right.
I mean, it's like the idea of having a strong mayor in a democratic city. I mean, there are people who are Republicans here, but come on, this is a blue place. The idea that somehow we're going to end up in a situation where there's going to be like, oh, well, we're going to have a mayor who's going to come in and change everything and make the place so much better. And guess who's going to piss off? Everybody else. Guess what they'll do? Vote in somebody else who will want to do something. It's like they're not considering that the idea of having a strong single executive for a city is setting yourself up for more authoritarian things to happen and more raucous elections. Now, beside the point, I mean, like, we could have a corrupt legislature or a corrupt city manager. I mean, those things perfectly well happen. That might be the case. I don't know. But the people advocating for us to change our government are not bringing up the corruption of our current elected officials. They're just saying that this particular form of government is less effective and less responsive to the citizens. And I'm like, well, it may be, but what are you trying to do? I mean, like, what do you want us to do different?
Yeah.
And they don't say, because they're just advocating it as some sort of like, well, we should be in line with other municipalities in the area. And I'm like, who cares?
Wow.
So anyway, it's like, that's where the anarchist in me comes out. It's like, this is silly. We have a distributed power structure in order that nobody can take advantage of it. I mean, isn't that a good thing? I don't understand this whole thing of like, let's elect somebody and make them full-time, make them have more pay than the city council members are currently paid $11,000 a year. It's a part-time gig. The city manager makes like somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 because he's a full-time administrator of a large municipality that's a huge tax base, and there's a lot of stuff, there are a lot of services to take care of, and there's a large number of employees, right? So we're going to make the mayor that person. So we're going to elect a person into that position, basically, and we're going to pay them 10 times more, 8 times more. I can't do the math that quickly.
Yeah.
Multiple times more than the city council.
Do you know what the city council members do outside of?
Well, they have regular jobs. I mean, they're just residents of Cleveland Heights.
Okay. So it's literally people in the community.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, well, it's like. It boggles my mind as to why anyone's getting worked up about this.
Yeah.
It's
I've been having a lot of interesting, just the whole, like, socialism never works, except this laundry list of times it has worked.
Right.
And I mean, like, there's the more extreme examples, like the Zapatistas and Rojava, which are, full-fledged libertarian socialists, but... like you look at the Spanish Commune in the 1930s, after the, before the Civil War. There was also the Black Army in Russia, and those were literally thriving communities that were smashed out, by authoritarian communists or authoritarian fascists.
Right.
And And I mean even more democratic socialist or social democracy. Like just what's happening in the Netherlands and Norway and Switzerland and Sweden and I don't know. It's just it's such a talking point to say that socialism doesn't work,
Right.
and then bring up bring up the most authoritarian examples. Um, I mean, you could use the same like, democracy doesn't work because Germany was a democracy.
Right. Right. I mean, or democracy doesn't work. It elected Donald Trump.
Right, right.
I mean, just like
It,
it's this. Yeah, it's this whole
capitalism doesn't
what's
work. Think of all of the violence.
Really, it's
Yeah.
electing one person to take care of all of our problems is not democracy. It's not democracy. Democracy is us making collective decisions. Us making collective decisions is not saying, "Hey, that guy over there, make our decisions for us."
Mm-hmm.
So, we don't have democratic institutions. We have oligarchic institutions, and I'm annoyed that they're taking something that is even slightly bit Republican, a small R Republican, having a legislature that is a group of people that we've selected that hopefully have different interests that will come together and help us decide how we should do trash pickup.
There
And-
was
Yeah.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
You're
there was
fine.
a post on Facebook this week that one of the responses was, it was just like not very well thought through. This is a good person, who popped on, but it was one of those, like the meme said something to the effect of, everybody when they hit age 18 should be automatically registered to vote.
Uh-huh.
And the response from this person was, well, that shouldn't happen because then voters will just get lazy and pick the easiest candidate to pick, without having to think about it.
What?
And I thought about it and was like, that's what's That's what's been going on the entire time I've ever been alive.
Yeah.
How is that a difference?
Right. Let's continue to make it hard so
Right.
that it sucks. This kind of thinking is the thing that drives me crazy.
I know.
There are certain people that are like, I don't know how many people think this, but I'm just going to pick a candidate and say this about them. It doesn't matter who I say it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people who say, well, if we just elect Bernie, then everything will be fine. Right? We just need a Democrat in office. And as soon as we have the Democrat, then we can finally begin to solve all our problems.
Right.
Now, is that a step in the right
blue,
direction?
No matter who.
Is that a step? Is anybody other than Donald Trump or Mike Pence being president a step in the right direction? Yes, of course. I mean, anyone who would actually run that actually has some slim. I mean, fuck, even Mark Sanford would be better. The guy from the Appalachian Trail business, he's running against Donald Trump as a Republican. I mean, even he would be better. But but that's not going to solve anything, right? It's a step in the right direction, and it requires a whole shit ton more work that requires humans in this society to interact differently and better and more intelligently together in order to solve collective problems. The issue is that we have a system that is designed to make sure that none of that happens by having us elect one person or 100 people or 535 people and then letting them all fight over money.
Oh God.
And and that's just being writ large under a stupid little thing about how we handle trash pickup and the fire department and the police in Cleveland Heights. Now, of course, all of those things end up being very important. Police in any given city are doing active harm to human beings, especially in a place that has as many black people as the place I live does. Right? I mean, that's just the nature of the system. It doesn't matter whether or not the police are good people. in their daily life,
Right.
or their intentions. This is about a structural systemic problem, right?
Right.
So we all might want to have the best president possible, and most of us might agree on who that might be. But the system is designed to make sure that that person single-handedly cannot do much.
Mm-hmm.
Because the real people who have the power, that is the actual money, they are making sure that the systems are designed to make sure that we won't abrogate their power.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so there's my political screed of the day.
Well, we do have we got 5 minutes left here.
Okay.
So I actually I was thinking we could either talk about talking music or music improvisation.
So well, let me do the one thing I was going to mention earlier.
Yep.
So I'm reading William Duckworth's Talking Music. He wrote a couple of these volumes, and so he interviewed over a long period of time, and then transcribed and wrote them up. Interviews with American experimental composers, the people I care the most about. And so I'm reading about Christian Wolff, and the little intro that Duckworth did before this little interview. He mentioned, this is something I thought you'd find interesting, Dorian. So quoting from page 180. After high school and a trip to Europe where, at Cage's insistence, he met Pierre Boulez, Wolff went to Harvard to major in classics. His parents had discouraged him from going to a conservatory, and besides, Wolff knew he would never be able to support himself with the kind of music he wrote. While at Harvard, though, he was able to arrange a concert for Cage and pianist David Tudor, and he wrote a quasi-improvisatory duo piano piece for himself and fellow student Frederick Jevsky. From that point, his music opened to performer participation, and he began allowing chance and controlled spontaneity to play a part. At the time, Wolff believed that in order for a piece to, quote, come alive, unquote, the performers had to be engaged in a new way as creative participators. Then it says, in 1970, saying the Vietnam War was like a summons that woke him up and made him choose sides. Wolff espoused a form of democratic socialism, began writing overtly political music. The results include wobbly music, based on the radical IWW labor movement from the early part of the century, and Braver Man music, a set of instrumental variations based on a German concentration camp song, Changing the System, a 1973 work, using a text that comes out of the 68-69 student uprisings in the U.S., is the piece Wolff thinks of as his most successful political work. And then it goes on and mentions like Feldman and Cunningham and stuff. So anyway, wow. I just thought it was like, Dorian, you've been talking about the IWW and the social, the chorus thing, and it was like, as soon as I read wobbly music, I went, well, Dorian needs to know about that.
Yeah, please.
I mean, you almost wrote a piece with that title. I mean, like, he wrote a piece called Changing the System. Didn't you write a piece called Change the System or something? Or is Fuck the System? Right?
Fuck the System.
Right.
No,
right, yeah.
Mine was a little more elegant,
Right. Yours was a little more, yours was a little more, oh, fuck, what's the name of that group? Shit.
Slayer?
Well, yeah. Chuck D.
Oh, Public Enemy.
Public Enemy, or the...
absolutely.
Or Tom Morello, what's the name of that one again?
Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, I know those names, they're just not coming to my head.
Right,
anyway,
yeah. No, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, fight the power.
I think Tom Morello's pretty good with the wobblies. What do you think?
Oh yeah. He actually wrote in not the most recent Little Red Songbook reprint, but the one before the current. And for those that don't know, the Little Red Songbook is it's just a collection of labor songs from the early days of the wobbly movement. Though they do update it, like there's actually, there's a song about being a barista at Starbucks in the most, the current one. But yeah, anyways, Tom Morello wrote the introduction for the last reprint.
Sure.
So yeah, no, he's in good standing with the Wobblies. So is Chomsky. Jeff Monson is another one. Who's the guy who started the ACLU?
Oh shit.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyways, he was in the Wobblies. Helen Keller, Roger Baldwin. That's who.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. They were all Wobblies. You
Sure,
know.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. It's it actually cracks me up when you learn about people in history and learn about their political views. Albert Einstein has an article called "Why I'm a Socialist."
So Dorian, another interview in this book is with Conlon Nancarrow, and Nancarrow also, I mean, he went to the Spanish American. He went and joined the Abraham Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And he later said that he basically came around to a form of democratic socialism as his political philosophy.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
wow.
And of course there's Jeffsky, which we don't even have to say anything other than just say and Jeffsky.
So we are at our final minute.
Okay.
So anyways, yeah, David and I are going to keep doing this. This is Trysteropod. We're composers. We like politics. Well, I hate politics, but it's important to be involved in them because real people's lives do get affected by decisions that are often made outside of our control, and it's very important to find solidarity and find community with your your fellow human beings. And I don't know. I've just found the left wing to be much more logical and much more rational, much more realistic in accomplishing actual humanistic and solidarity-oriented goals for oppressed people all over the spectrum.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right, we're Trysteropod. We'll catch you next time.
Have a good one, everybody.